Itoro and Charity were the kind of couple people admired from afar. Neighbors would point at them and say, "See how God has joined two beautiful souls together." At wedding anniversaries, the pictures hung like trophies on social media. To outsiders, Itoro's tough frame, his confident smile and steady walk make him look like a man who will never hurt his wife. Charity's voice, her graceful steps and constant smile painted the picture of a woman living her best life, but only the walls of their home knew the truth. In the beginning, Itoro was charming. He bought flowers, sang her praises, and told her she was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Charity, full of hope, often told her friends, "God has blessed me with my own prince." But as months rolled into years, the colors began to fade. The same lips that once kissed her now hurled insults. The same hands that once held her tenderly became heavy with anger. Nights that should have been filled with peace became nights of fear. Charity tried to hide the pain. She wore long sleeves to cover bruises. She used makeup to disguise tears and forced smiles in public. In church, she raised her hands during worship, but inside she was whispering, "Lord, will I ever survive this?" One evening, scrolling through her phone, she read the story of Osinachi again, the gospel singer who stayed too long in abuse and paid with her life. Her hands shook and her heart screamed. That night, she made a vow. "I will not die here, and I will not be another woman's lesson. I will live so that my child can still have a mother." The choice was not easy. She knew society would call her weak and her family will ask her to endure for the child's sake. But she also knew the truth, that children do not need a broken mother, they need a living one. So, one quiet morning, with just a suitcase in one hand and her little boy's finger in the other, she walked away. Behind her, Itoro crossed. He shouted and he promised she would regret it. Ahead of her was silence, wide and uncertain. She didn't know how she would feed her son or where tomorrow's rent would come from, but she knew that her freedom was worth the risk. Starting over was harder than Charity imagined. The morning she walked out with her son, freedom tasted sweet, but reality was bitter. She had no savings, no house of her own, and no rich uncle anywhere waiting to help. All she had was determination, a child to protect, and a God she prayed would not abandon her. They rented a single room somewhere. At night, mother and son lay side by side on a tin mattress listening to rats scratch through the ceiling. Yet, in that room, Charity found a kind of peace she had never known before. No shouting, no blows, and no fear of a sudden storm. She worked small jobs, and later she secured a position as a cashier in a mall. Her back ached, her fingers blistered, but every coin she earned was proof that she could stand on her own 2 feet. Itoro, on the other hand, moved on quickly. Within a year, he remarried. Pictures of his new wife in expensive attire and jewelry flooded Facebook. People whispered that he had finally upgraded. Charity saw the photos, and though her heart twisted, she told herself, "Let him have his word. Mine is different now." Still, life tied them together. They had a son to raise, so co-parenting began. On some weekends, Itoro requested to see the boy. At first, Charity resisted, but then she reminded herself that a child needs both parents. She allowed it, even though each visit left her with worry. The arrangement was never smooth. Sometimes Itoro kept the child longer than agreed. Sometimes he returned him with new habits Charity didn't like, but she endured, telling herself that peace was better than constant fights. Years rolled by. Charity's son grew stronger, taller and brighter. At school, he stood out as intelligent and kind, much like his mother. And though Charity often struggled to pay his school fees, she never allowed him to feel the hunger and shame she carried within. But one holiday changed everything. When the boy turned 10, Itoro requested that he spend a long vacation at his house. Charity hesitated. Her heart felt heavy, but everyone around told her, "Let him go. At least his father is asking to be present. Against her instinct, she agreed. She packed his bag, prayed over him, and hugged him tight before letting him go. She had no idea that the goodbye hug would mark the beginning of the darkest chapter of her life. The long holiday began like any other. Charity's son waved happily from the backseat of Itoro's car, clutching his small bag as though he was heading for an adventure. Charity's heart tightened, but she forced a smile and whispered a silent prayer. Lord, please protect my child. Don't let him see what I saw, and don't let him feel what I felt. The weeks crawled by. She tried to distract herself with work, church, and neighbors' chatter, but her mind was never free. Every morning, she looked at her phone waiting for a call from her boy. Sometimes it came, sometimes it didn't. Whenever she asked Itoro how he was doing, the answers were short. He is fine and nothing more. Finally, the holiday ended. Charity prepared her son's favorite meal, jollof rice with fried plantain, and hummed joyfully as she stirred the pot. She couldn't wait to hold him again. But when she arrived at Itoro's house, the air and stairs were different. "Where is my son?" she asked, trying to peek inside. Itoro cleared his throat, his eyes shifting. "Charity, he's gone." "Gone? Gone to where exactly?" He looked away, then back at her. "He's dead." The word tilted. Charity's knees buckled. She clutched the gate as though her fingers could stop time. "What did you just say?" "He fell sick," Itoro said flatly. "We tried, but he didn't make it." Charity screamed. She rushed inside, desperate to see. She was desperate to touch and just to be sure it wasn't true. But instead of leading her to her son's body, Itoro dragged her to the backyard where a fresh mound of earth stood. "There," he said, pointing. "I buried him." Charity's body shook violently. "You buried my child without me? You buried my child without even telling me he was sick?" Her voice cracked into pieces. "Itoro, you buried my son like a stray dog?" Itoro stood cold and unmoved, his arms folded as though this was normal. Charity collapsed on the ground, clutching the soil with trembling hands, screaming her son's name. She was begging God for answers. That night, as she stumbled back to her room, her soul felt like a hollow drum. She replayed every memory. His last smile, the bag he carried, and the hug she gave him. She had sent a healthy child for a holiday, and now she had nothing but a grave she hadn't asked for. And deep inside, something told her the story wasn't complete. Something about Itoro's eyes, his tone, and his strange calmness. None of it made sense. For days, Charity lived like a woman trapped between sleep and waking. Her son's laughter echoed in her ears, but when she stretched her hand, she touched only emptiness. At night, she jotted up from nightmares, sweating and screaming his name. But grief soon turned into rage. She stormed the police station, her voice shaking but firm. "He buried my son without my consent. He killed him," she cried, slamming her fist on the wooden desk. The officers exchanged weary glances. "Madam, calm down," one said. "Do you have evidence?" "Evidence?" Charity spat, her eyes wide with pain. "My evidence is that grave he showed me." But when they called Itoro in, the story changed. He came dressed in a fine attire, smelling of wealth and confidence. He spoke respectfully and weaved lies like a seasoned storyteller. "Officers, I tried to reach her," he said, "but she ignored my calls. The boy was already dead, so you don't expect me to keep a dead child in my house, so I gave him a decent burial." Charity's jaw dropped. That's a big fat lie, but the officer's eyes told her what she already feared. Itoro's money and connections weighed more than her tears. The case was written off as soon as envelopes entered their hands. She returned home with fire in her chest. Friends advised her to move on and let God judge. But how could a mother move on when her child's grave was carved without her blessing? How could she live knowing the truth was buried under silence and corruption? One night, she sat alone in the darkness with tears streaking her cheeks. Her voice was hoarse but steady as she prayed. God, if this man truly buried my son, then let all be well with him. But if he lied to me, let his peace be taken. Let him find no rest on his bed, no joy in his riches, and no escape in his lies. Arise, O Lord, and fight for me. From that night, the battle shifted. What the police could not handle, heaven took over. And far away in the comfort of his home, Itoro began to sweat in his sleep. At first, he laughed. He boasted to his friends at the bar that Charity was wasting her time. Which woman fights me and wins? He sneered, raising his glass of brandy. Let her cry. Let her run to the police. Nothing will happen. But something did happen. That night, his sleep was interrupted. He found himself in a dream standing in the middle of a dark field. From nowhere, heavy lashes of a whip cut across his back. Whap! The pain was so sharp that he screamed and fell to his knees. He turned, but no one was there. Again, the whip came. Whap! He begged for mercy, but the unseen hand continued until he woke up drenched in sweat, his body trembling. Just a dream, he muttered, wiping his face. But when he tried to go back to sleep, his bed felt like fire. His new wife slept peacefully beside him, but his eyes remained wide and halted. The torment continued. Every night, he was dragged into battles he could not win. Sometimes he saw shadows chasing him. Other times, he found himself buried alive, screaming for help. He began to dread the night. His business, too, began to suffer. Clients withdrew without explanation. Promises failed. Even his closet allies grew distant. Yet, in his pride, he refused to bow. He told himself, Charity cannot defeat me. No woman can. The truth is, the child he claimed was dead was alive, hidden in another city and living with his own elder sister. Even with all that was going on, he still refused to tell Charity the truth. Instead, he hated her more and called her all manner of names. And in that distant city, the boy began to wither. His sickness began like a whisper that his aunt thought it was just malaria. But as the days turned into weeks, the sickness refused to leave. His once bright eyes became dull. His laughter faded and his little shoulders slumped as though carrying an invisible weight. His aunt watched helplessly as the boy who had arrived full of life now coughed through the night. God, what is this? She murmured one night. I agreed to keep him, but not to bury him. Finally, out of fear, she called her brother Itoro. Oga, her voice trembled over the phone. This boy will not make it if you keep him here. He is sick. I have spent money. I have taken him to hospitals. Doctors don't understand what is wrong. The more we treat it, the worse it becomes. On the other side of the line, Itoro gripped his phone tightly. He had always believed himself untouchable and too powerful to be shaken. But the weakness in his sister's voice pierced him. He swallowed hard. I will come, he said at last, though the words tasted bitter. He traveled the next day, and when he saw his son again, his heart skipped. The boy was a shadow of himself. His skin clung to his bones, his lips were pale, and his eyes seemed to carry a sorrow too heavy for a child of 10. My boy, Itoro whispered, kneeling by the bed, but the child barely moved his lips. His small hand reached out weakly, and for the first time, guilt stabbed Itoro in the chest. Doctors were summoned. Tests were run. Money was poured like water. He carried his son from one private hospital to another and from expensive specialists to spiritual healers. And at night, he sat by the boy's bed, watching his chest rise and fall in shallow breaths. Sometimes, the child groaned in his sleep, his small hand clutching at something unseen. Daddy, let me go home, he mumbled once, barely audible. Ituro froze. Home? But you are home, my son, he said quickly, brushing sweat from the boy's forehead. But deep down, he knew the boy didn't mean his house. He meant Charity's house. As weeks passed, Itoro's words began to bleed. He sold lands, emptied accounts, even borrowed from friends he once boasted to. Yet, nothing changed. The boy's illness mocked his money, stripping away every naira without mercy. His new wife grew restless. One night she confronted him, her voice sharp with irritation. Itoro, how long will you keep pouring money into this child? Haven't you seen it is beyond mercy? Maybe it is spiritual. Itoro's jaw tightened. Are you saying my son should die? I am saying, she folded her arms, that this is not ordinary, and if you refuse to admit it, you will soon follow him to the grave. I didn't sign up for this suffering, no. He raised his hand as though to strike her, but stopped midway. His strength, his pride, his peace, all of it was sleeping. One evening, the boy's condition worsened suddenly. His breathing became labored. His eyes rolled back and his body convulsed on the bed. Panic gripped the house. Itoro rushed forward, holding him down and shouting, "Call the doctor! Call anyone!" But in the midst of the chaos, the boy's voice came out soft, almost like a whisper from another world. "Daddy, please call mommy." The room froze. Itoro's wife, who had been silently watching, grabbed his shoulder. "Did you hear that? The child wants his mother. You can't fight this anymore. Call Charity before you bury him for real." Itoro trembled. The thought of calling Charity was like swallowing fire. It was like admitting defeat and to let her see that his power, his money, and his pride had all failed. But as the boy's body shook, fear crushed his pride. With shaking hands, he dialed Charity's number. His voice, once arrogant, was now cracked like dry wood. Charity. Her silence, on the other hand, was heavy and cold. "It's the boy," he said, his throat dry. He's not well," he stammered. "Please come over." Charity closed her eyes with tears welling. "Which boy? The one in the grave or another?" "I am sorry," Itoro apologized. Then she heard her son's voice that melted all the anger away and activated the heart of a mother. "Mommy, I have missed you." "Child." This buried everything as she hurried to his place. When she stepped into the house, the atmosphere changed. Itoro, haggard and pale from sleepless nights, stood awkwardly by the door, unable to meet her eyes. His new wife slipped away silently as though ashamed. Charity walked straight to the room. The moment her son saw her, his weak lips curved into the faintest smile. "Mommy?" She ran to him, gathering him into her arms. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "My son and my heartbeat, I am here." And something miraculous happened. His breathing eased, his trembling stopped. His eyes, once dull, regained a spark, and within minutes, color returned to his cheeks. Itoro stood frozen, his mouth slightly opened. Weeks of hospitals, money, connections, all had failed. But one touch from his mother and one whisper of her love, the child was already healing. He then knew that nobody can ever separate the child from his mother and that a mother and child's connection is divine. Charity couldn't go home because it was late. She stayed by his side all through the night, holding him like she would never let go again. She didn't sleep. She only whispered prayers, and every time she stroked his head, his breathing grew steadier. Every time she said, "You are safe now, my son," his frail body seemed to find strength. By morning, the boy was sitting up in bed, sipping pap slowly from a cup. The doctors who had been coming daily to monitor him were shocked. This kind of turnaround, one muttered, scratching his head. We can't explain it medically. But Charity knew that her son had not needed injections or drips. He had only needed her presence. Itoro stood at the doorway watching. His pride had been crushed into dust. His connections, his arrogance, none of them had saved his son. The house became silent and he moved around like a shadow. His new wife, who once flaunted herself like a queen, now tiptoed around the house, embarrassed by the miracle that exposed their emptiness. Charity didn't argue. She didn't shout or boast. She simply went home with her son. She bathed him, fed him, prayed with him, and told him stories that made him laugh again. The boy held her hand tightly and whispered, "Mommy, please don't leave me again." "I will never leave you," Charity replied, kissing his forehead. "Not again. Not ever." And she meant it. Quietly, she began to plan. She had saved money over the years, little by little, like a woman storing oil in jars. Now, those savings became her weapon. She visited the immigration office secretly, filling out forms for passports. She called a trusted friend abroad who guided her on paperwork. Every step she took in silence. At night, when her son slept peacefully beside her, she stared at him and thought, "You will never be a pawn in his games again." Never. She didn't tell anyone. She knew the kind of man Ituro was. If he sensed her plan, he would use his influence to stop it. So she started acting gracefully and kept her secret tucked inside her chest like treasure. By the time her son's strength fully returned, her decision had hardened like iron. She was leaving, not just the city, she was leaving the country. Her plan was almost complete. She had gathered her documents, arranged her son's papers, and secured visas. Every visit to the immigration office, every signed form was a silent victory. Her son, too young to understand, only knew that his mother seemed happier these days. She cooked more, laughed more, and every night told him stories about faraway lands. One day she whispered, stroking his hair, "We will live in a place where no one will take you from me again." The next day, she packed her clothes, the documents, and the Bible that had been her anchor. She dressed her boy in a simple shirt and jeans, tied his shoelaces, and held his hand tightly. "Mommy, are we going on a trip?" he asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes, my love," she said, forcing a calm smile. "A long, beautiful trip." They slipped out quietly. A taxi was already waiting that she had arranged days earlier. The driver, a kind elderly man, loaded their bags without questions. At the airport, Charity's hands trembled as she clutched their passports. Her heart tottered with fear that at any moment someone would call her name, drag her back, or accuse her of kidnapping her own son. But no one stopped her. The officials stamped her papers. The gates opened and the runway lights glowed like a path to freedom. As the plane ascended, her son pressed his face against the window, giggling. "Mommy, look, we are flying." Charity closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Not tears of sorrow this time, but tears of relief. When Itoro discovered the disappearance, his world shattered. He made calls immediately, pulled strings, even bribed airport officials, but it was too late. Charity and the boy were gone, and they were gone for good. He tried for months to trace them, but every lead ended in dead silence. His connections, once powerful, now mocked him. In abroad, life was not instantly easy for Charity, but it was peaceful. She worked, she studied, and she built a new life brick by brick. Her son thrived in school, free from the weight of secrets and lies, and every morning she woke up grateful. Grateful that she had left when she did. Grateful that she had not become another Osinachi, and grateful that her son was alive, free and laughing again. Hey, African Tales by Kama Tribe, how are you all doing? For me, I am doing just fine. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I did. Before I leave today, please permit me to say this. Marriage is beautiful, but it is not a prison. Love should not cost you your life, your peace, or your child's future. Many women stay in abusive marriages because of what will people say, or because they fear starting all over again alone. But the truth is this: a broken marriage is not the end of life, but a broken life is the end of everything. Charity story teaches us that silence in the face of abuse can be deadly, but courage to walk away can preserve generations. She chose peace over shame. She chose life over death, and her son was saved because of that decision. And to all the men and women who are using their children to fight their partners, please note that children are not weapons for revenge. They are gifts from God, meant to be nurtured and not to be used as pawns in pride or bitterness. Finally, we must all remember that the justice of man may fail, but the justice of God never fails. When systems fail, prayer still speaks, and where connections block the truth, heaven is still in the business of fighting for the oppressed. So, has your child been taken away from you, and you have tried all you could just to regain that connection, but they are shutting you out simply because they are richer than you or they have more connections than you do? Report them to the courts of heaven and see how God will work in your favor. With this, I sign out from today's story. Kindly give it a thumbs up and let me get to read from you. Should a woman always stay in a broken marriage for the children, or is it better to live and fight for the children in freedom even without nothing? Share your thoughts with me, as I would like us to interact with this. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please punch on that subscribe button so that you can join the Karma tribe. Until I bring the next interesting story your way, it is a goodbye from here, and God bless you.